What happens if you need to plan to do the plan so that you can get the plan together? On this episode, we'll talk about the plan and who can bring that plan to you and make it right and what type of experience they have to make you better at what you do.
Welcome to another episode of the EMS Wizard podcast. I am the gentleman G. Mark Casey, and I have John, Terry, and Walter on this episode. We are looking through the lens of the Wizards to bring you insight and education on EMS leadership and management. And tonight we have a special guest. Terry, would you introduce our guest?
Thank you, gentlemen. Casey. So indeed, as opposed to the typical guests, that would be you and Walter. We've got Mr. Billy, who is going to be joining us tonight from Northeast Exercises at Northeast, which would refer to Northeastern North Carolina, not Northeastern somewhere else. But I just feel that I have to throw this out here that he's a believer in purple and yellow, just like we are. But he doesn't believe in Western Carolina University. He is an Eastern Carolina University graduate. And alumni and proud benefactor. So, Billy, welcome to the Best Friends, and tell us a little bit about you and your history. We were chatting before. You've worked with, I think, just about all of us in the past in your various roles that you've had over the years, and it just seemed a natural fit for you to bring your past experiences to us with the Best Friends. So, please.
Yeah, guys, thanks. Like you said, my name's Billy Winn. I hail from Roduca, North Carolina, the metropolis in northeastern North Carolina. I started in EMS in 1986. You were just in diapers or something, probably, Terry. But I was with Gates County Rescue Squad at the time. We were doing a lot of search and rescue and just volunteer stuff. And had a best friend. It's a really cool story. My best friend was my current wife's grandfather. So I had a 75-year-old best friend when I was 15, and he was a charter member of the rescue squad. And we did everything together from duty every Tuesday night. You know, my parents would take me to the station, and we would stay at the station and pull duty on Tuesday nights, and really just learned a lot. You know, I was raised in the firehouse. My dad was a volunteer fire chief, and but my passion was EMS, and later became rescue and search and rescue. But I kind of like Walter said earlier in one of the podcasts I listened to, I took my test. I was certified before I was 18. I was just waiting for that thing to show up in the mail when I turned 18, and been on an ambulance for a long time. And I have recently let my certification lapse just due to other things. But I started out after I graduated from East Carolina University. We don't have to enunciate the earn on that one.
Never heard of it.
Not West?
No, not West.
Okay.
Couldn't get in.
The other one.
Yes, that's probably correct. But we, after I graduated high school and decided I was going to be a teacher because I needed something to supplement my volunteer habit. I was in the volunteer fire department. I was president of the rescue squad at the time. I was 19 years old, and so became a school teacher because I liked the weekends off and the summers off. Gave me more time to volunteer, and I did that for 13 years between Bertie County and Gates County, from pre-K through college. I taught EMS, to adult learners, and in 2007, I had an opportunity to help the county write our first EMS system plan. I was doing that on my time. I was really doing it at school when I was supposed to be teaching. But I met the county manager. You know, up until that point, we really didn't really associate with county government until then. and then got a chance to meet the county manager, and he offered me a job in emergency management. I did that for 13 years. And then I had an opportunity to go to work for North Carolina Emergency Management to finish my career. And I just retired in January 1st or end of December. And now I'm full time running my business, Northeast Exercise and Training. So that's the run. I'm married, got 2 grown kids, and 2 of the most beautiful grandkids you've seen.
Now, you said you started in the 80s. What that was not, you said 1986?
That's right.
Mark, how old were you in 1986?
Well, at 1986, I actually wasn't born, but the one thing you said, Bill, that I can relate to is how you had a 75-year-old friend whenever you were early in your career. And John, I feel like you are probably my 75-year-old friend.
Touche on that.
Saw that coming. Saw that
All
coming.
right, you got me.
You got you on that one. Huh?
I actually got a list of things. I was sitting here trying to think of which rabbit I would chase. The one that I actually I just found interesting in hearing it. And just to reiterate to everybody, a lot of everything we do on here is plutonic. So not necessarily do we have a background on some of this stuff. So I hear it for the first time, when we get on here, unless I've just known you outside that. But one of the things you mentioned is having to get familiar with a system plan and write it, and coming up into the old school ways of the volunteer. You said volunteer coming in there, having to volunteer your time, having to do the ridiculous stuff Walter's talked about before in prior episodes of having to shoot out flares or whatever it is you didn't know where the call was, and get there. What was it like to transition from something that was a volunteer mentality to a career level that was Office of EMS driven to have a system plan? How does someone do that from a school teacher perspective that's basically doing it out of passion, and now it has to build and become what your career is?
Yeah, it was a huge change. And I came into EMS kind of in the second iteration, because in the 70s, so Gates County Rescue and EMS started in 1964, and it was just neighbors helping neighbors. It was people needed help. There were a group of people that said I can raise money, a group of people said that I could drive the ambulance, and it was really just drive fast, get there before they die. And so that mentality changed, and I think it was 72 when EMT was required, and that really put a real blanket, a wet blanket on a lot of those volunteers, because they were doing it out of the passion, and they was like, state's not going to tell me what to do. So I came in the 80s, and that had kind of waned. Those people had gotten out, and a new group of volunteers had come in that really wanted some training and stuff. So all of us were familiar with the state telling us about EMT, and I was at the beginning of EMTD. That was a big deal. Like, oh, I'm advanced. I have a D behind my EMT. That was the big thing. But so we were kind of the second chapter. And then the state came in and said, oh, we're going to make it even more formal, and we're going to do this system plan thing. And, I was really kind of into it, because it was my, kind of my thing. I had time. I think that's the main killer for most of us, is just not having time. But the job that I had gave me some time to work on stuff like that. So, I think being from an education background, it helped a little bit, because I was accustomed to writing lesson plans, and I was accustomed to turning those lesson plans in and having them critiqued and things. So it wasn't so much of a stretch doing that, but it was the turning of the page. It really began the next chapter.
Yeah, and I think you had your model system before you had that system plan stuff. Remember that? Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
They did that
Yeah.
whole, hey, let's have this
Mhm.
idea of a model EMS system and whatnot.
Yeah, that was not us.
Didn't last long.
No.
But Billy, I'm kind of interested in the part of your career where you kind of shifted from EMS into emergency management, because there's a lot of these things that are very similar but are two completely different animals in and of itself. So what kind of shifted you into that emergency management round? Because usually if you're getting emergency management, it's coming from a fire background or maybe an EMS background or maybe even a law enforcement background before you go into EMS or before you go into emergency management. I'm sorry. So what was it that kind of helped you make up your mind to kind of transition from EMS into emergency management?
So it's an interesting story. Again, that 75-year-old best friend I had, his name was Durwood Evans. It was
Okay. Yeah.
my current wife's grandfather, actually. I, my only wife, but it was her grandfather. And
It was an
I was
odd,
just
clarification there.
yeah,
Threw me off for a second.
there you go.
It would matter to me and Terry if we said that. It applies. It doesn't apply to anyone else on here. It applies to Terry and I.
well, he was by default, he was the what we called at the time captain. There wasn't a chief of EMS. He was the captain of the squad, and he retired from the paper mill, and so he had time on his hands. And the county was required sometime in the early '80s to have an emergency manager on paper. It was required. Every county was going to do that, and they got like $200 or something from the state if you had an emergency manager.
It was
So,
cheap. It was cheap.
Yeah, he didn't get anything. He was a volunteer emergency manager just by virtue of, hey, you're kind of emergency and you can't say no, so we'll make you that person. So, because of that, every time there was a tornado or every time there was a hurricane coming, I started getting on the conference calls with him. So I've been listening to hurricane conference calls since I was, still in high school. And so I was interested in that. And I was interested in EMS. I was interested in the day-to-day call stuff, but I was also interested in the disaster stuff. That's really what kind of piqued my attention. I liked mass casualty. I liked the hurricane response. I liked that type of stuff. And then I started going to some classes with him and things like that. So Durwood was the first emergency manager. Then probably 2002 or three, he finally said, "Guys, I'm 80 years old. I need to give this up." And so they did basically the same thing, gave it to somebody else, and she did it for a little while, and left for some various reasons. So I was the chief officer of the rescue squad. I got with the chief officers of the fire departments and said, "Hey guys, this is a great opportunity for us to get somebody that's going to support us. It's help us through these disasters." And I was working on that system plan at that time with the county manager, and he said, "Hey, how about you jump over here?" And so that was the beginning of that. I didn't start then. I said, you're kidding me. I'm a state employee. I'm a school teacher. I'm making $28,000 a year. What are you talking about? Nobody could ever match that.
Boom.
So anyway, they did. There was a series of pretty humorous events there. That county manager left, and they put out the job posting for somebody that was not what we had wanted. So just out of spite, I went to the interview, got the call back, and I was like, "Sorry, it's not what we wanted." And so they countered, and I ended up leaving the school system, going to the county, and it was a great move, being able to really build the program, because Durwood had been there, but he was not paid, and I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time and kind of build the program. It was really enjoyable, challenging, but enjoyable.
And you bring that up, and I'm frantically trying to find the photo right now, but there's a old picture that I have somewhere stored away. If I can find it, I'm gonna make it my background, where our previous emergency services director,
Hiram
presented a road sign where we have a Durwood Evans Road in our county. Is this got to be the same guy?
it's the well, the Durwood Evans Road sign is not this guy, but I was at the convention when Hiram presented
Yeah,
Durwood the sign. That sign is in my barn.
really?
It is. It was in Durwood's yard for years, but it's in my barn hanging up right now.
If I've got that picture somewhere. I'm gonna have to find it. I'm gonna have to frantically look for it real quick.
I think the thing that's probably getting away from folks is most of folks that listen to here are probably having a hard time understanding a lot of the things that you're talking about. And that is doing things for free, volunteering. We did this. Hey, tag, you're it. You're going to do this task in emergency management or even EMS, and you're going to do it for nothing except for your passion or whatnot. In today's world, these Gen Zers, I think most millennials, they probably are like, nah, I don't know that I'd ever do that for free or whatnot. It's a different world. So, I mean, it's interesting to hear the perspective of that.
But I would say Durwood Evans was the grandfather of Gates County Rescue Squad, from what I can remember. And every association meeting, every volunteer meeting, you saw Durwood there. And if you didn't see Durwood there, you asked the question, where's Durwood? He's got to be sick. Something's got to be happened, because he came religiously to every meeting that was had that there was some part of EMS or rescue involved with that. And, you know, I would say that his legend still lives on in people like Billy and some of the other people that knew him. But, even Gates County still has volunteers now. So they still have a rescue squad. They have paid staff at daytime and nighttime because of the volunteers. But you still have some decent volunteers in Gates County, from what I can remember, that are on the roster to function as volunteers still.
Yeah, they're waning.
That's right.
Our search and rescue team is completely volunteer. It's still based out of the rescue squad, out of convenience, instead of having to form something else. But all of that work is still done volunteer. So, yeah, Durwood was very small in stature. He was probably 5 foot nothing and 110 pounds, but he was a giant to me, man.
And he's passed on since,
Yes, yeah.
I'm assuming from the way you're talking. What year did he die?
Oh, he probably died in 2012, maybe.
Okay. All right.
What's interesting too, Billy, some of the similarities that I'm hearing from you, that negative motivation. We talk that sometimes, or really a lot of times, EMS folks are negatively motivated for why they do things, and then hearing that motivation, what this is who, if that's who they're gonna, I'm gonna go just out of spite, put in for it, and then I'm gonna get that job offer and be like, sorry, Joker, I'm not giving up my $28,000 a year. And
that's how you get them 1 year pins, just for the
So that's it. Okay.
Yeah. So what are some of the, we've chatted before, you've had an opportunity to build or to help, rebuild as the rescue transformed into system plan and all of that stuff. And then, hey, now we need to formalize some stuff with emergency management. So having done that, built something, rebuilt it, tweaked it, redirected it, what are some similarities that you've seen between the two, or some common themes or lessons between emergency management and EMS from that kind of boots building up standpoint?
Yeah, it's all pretty simple. It's all about dealing with people. The tactics are different, and any class that I ever teach or anything that I ever talk to people about, it's about the same thing. The tactics are going to be different. The tactics of emergency management are more coordination. The tactics of EMS are going to be medical. And how you deal with people, that's if you can conquer speaking words to people and communicating and and getting them to understand your vision, is the biggest part of the puzzle. If regardless of what you're doing, whether you're changing tires on a race car or whether you're putting out fires or chasing bad guys, really how you deal with other agencies or other people and other personalities is really going to dictate the outcome, the success of your outcome. Um, I've worked with so many people that had that big steel hammer, you're going to do it my way or else, and it doesn't work very well. You get results, but they're often those negative results. So, you know, what I used to say about still say about emergency management is you are the maestro that is required to provide excellent music, and you don't own any instruments and you can't sing. You just got to make good music with other people's stuff. And that's kind of how it was, transitioning from that volunteer mentality of EMS to starting to hire staff and put professionals, making it more professional. You really couldn't force them into anything. We didn't have enough money to draw them in. They still had to be there because they were passionate, but you know, uh, kind of sell that it's more a professional venue now than it was. It's about dealing with people. Sociology really intrigues me.
And you've somehow taken that in your career and built that up to be what you are today. I mean, that's the thing that I've had the experience with you on is having someone, I mean, to go out and teach those things is one thing, like reading from a book and saying, hey, I'm going to practically apply it. But when you come out and you're doing your different classes and things that you offer through your company, which you have opportunity to just explain what all that is, but that's the value in something like that. There's just not a lot of those people out there to do those things. I mean, if there was a Durwood today doing those things, it would be necessary for the Durwoods of today to get out there and share that experience because people's not, there's nothing out there that really guides someone through that and to share those experiences. There's just a lot of value behind that. And I think that's one of the things that you're able to bring to, an area when you do an exercise in general is to say, look, I'm not interpreting some book somewhere and telling you how to do it. I've lived this. I've had to write this. I've had to be a part of it. I've had to be the maestro. And I think that's what's ideal when you have these folks that come out there. We have that same philosophy in our EMS officer program, very particular about who we have come in and do that. We don't want great speakers, just because someone can talk well. We want someone that's done the job and knows how to do it.
I mean, you did let me in, but
needed a kid.
oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Needed to appeal to the youth.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thing. Just a
Generational.
Yeah. Had to skip a couple to find me. That's okay though. Probably good move.
Walter takes care of the geriatric population, and you take care of the pediatric, and it's me and Terry's show. So
Yes.
And just a couple of guests, aren't we, Walter?
We are just a couple guests.
I've accepted the fact. It's fine.
We're resident guests.
Resident guest. Yeah, I like that.
Terry has words.
I do. So, Billy, what would you say for the average EMS person? You've progressed through the ranks, and it's funny. I never knew you were an EMTD, but I remember going to take. I think it was my intermediate test years ago, and hearing these EMTDs thumping their chests, talking about it's not paramedics that save lives, it's us EMTDs out there with blind insertion airways. I think like the combi tube and that AED and
EpiPens.
Yeah, I was thinking like EpiPen.
I was an EMTD weird. With Billy. I understand.
Yes. Well, I don't obviously understand. So that EMTD what we now call advanced, but EMT intermediate. And so what are some of those similarities that you would say? I know you've hit on some of this, but some people might look at emergency management, and North Carolina is interesting, where some agencies, EMSs with emergency services, you have very integrated emergency management. And some places they can't spell emergency management. So what are some lessons that you would say that maybe emergency management can bring to bear or help out or plan to fail, for the EMS leader that's out there in North Carolina? What advice would you have, or what piece would you say?
I'm going to go back to making that music. I don't own the instrument, but I better know what that instrument looks like, feels like, and smells like. So you have to tie those people together. Emergency management's role, in my mind, especially in a small place. Now, I've never been in a large system in a big city or anything, but in a small place, and that's Eastern North Carolina, you have to integrate. You have to sit down and drink coffee. You have to go out and eat lunch. You cannot do it from your office. You have to go to those nighttime fire meetings. You have to go to the association meetings. You have to let them know that you care. It's all, they're not going to sing pretty for you unless they know that you're going to be there in the trenches with them. There were many times where I didn't necessarily need to be on a scene. I didn't bring any fruit to bear on some of those mass casualty scenes and stuff, but I was there. I was pushing stretchers if I needed to, or saying I'll take care of your landing zones, or doing those things. However, I'll caveat that with I was an ops guy. I am an ops guy. That's my background. So I understood what they were doing. I could pull hose off that fire truck just as easily as those guys could. But more than that, I was willing to help them pack hose, put it back on. I wasn't the one to get in the truck and leave. I'd grab the Clorox wipes and the trash bags and help clean out the ambulance after a trauma. So I think they need to know that you care and you're bought into what they're doing. I think that's the big thing. There are many schools of thought on emergency management. One of the new schools of thought is completely education based, not operations based. There's a lot of colleges that are doing emergency management programs, and they're not inherently bad, but I feel like they're setting up their graduates some because they're not giving them experiential opportunities at operations.
I could see that as well, Billy, is, you have to, and that's the same thing, what you just said then with the sheet of music and the instrument. Even as a mostly EMS, and I've done some emergency management as well, but as a EMS supervisor or EMS leader, EMS administrator, you have to have that same thought. And if you don't have that same thought, then you're not going to get the buy-in and get the assistance that you need and the assistance that you need to give out to somebody. So I agree with that. That's a good analogy of that instrument. I don't own the instrument, but I need to know about it. That's pretty good analogy.
What would you say stands out to you, Billy, in the years coming in like you did in the 80s and the 90s? You saw similar transitions that most of us on here have seen. What would you say that has been if you had to put a pin on a timeline and say this is a point marker and this is another marker of change or progression, EMS or EM, either one or maybe both, what would you say is on that timeline of things that are significant to the industry?
One of the strong points that we used to have, I would put our compassion for our citizens when we were volunteers against anybody. We cared about what we did because we were doing it for our neighbors.
Right.
It was what you were supposed to do. We were raised by people that took care of their neighbors, and we kept that tradition alive. There became a point mid to late '90s where we were just spinning wheels, man. There just wasn't enough people to do what we knew we needed to do, and it was tough. Those were some really tough days. I gave up a lot of things that I should not have given up, like children's birthday parties and opportunities with my wife, and just things that I gave. Not just me. The group of people that was working just gave our time, thinking that we were doing the best that we could. Um, but that was the transition when we started hiring employees, and we had to go more professional. So that transition from volunteer to professional was a huge leap. There's still a place for volunteers. It's crucial in a small town that you have people that are willing to kind of step out of their way. But there was a time when I had the realization as the chief that I expect when I go to a restaurant that the cook's going to get paid. I expect that the server is going to get paid. I don't expect my service to be any better if they're getting paid, but I have no expectation that the person doing that service for me is going to do it for free. Yet I'm expecting our community to go out and get all of this training to intermediate and paramedic level and not get paid for it. It was a real realization that, number one, we didn't have the people to do it. Number two, I'm asking them to do something that's pretty critical that we get right for nothing. So that was a really big change in attitude for me, and yeah, those early days, everything was today, even everything's tied to money. But the contracts that volunteer rescue squads had with the counties back then were, $1,000. That was the budgeted amount that's going to run the agency for 12 months. I legitimately remember sitting in meetings when we had squad meetings saying, are we going to buy oxygen this month, or are we going to pay the light bill this month?
Wow.
Or are we going to go get some more chickens donated so we can cook them and raise money? Those were very difficult transitional years that, we couldn't see the forest for the trees, kind of. It was time to make that transition, but we were a little hesitant to make it because we didn't want the man telling us what to do. This is our agency. We don't want anybody, in our business. And it was time for people to be in the business. It was time for the citizens that we were providing service to kind of foot the bill a little bit.
We don't want those daggum people in Raleigh telling us
Oh yeah.
what we have to do. And I think that's one of the interesting things, hearing that today's generation doesn't understand. Just like I didn't live that life with the volunteer agency to say, hey, is it O2 or the light bill? But today's generation doesn't always realize those transitional things, and I think some folks might think those times, well, that was the 80s, and for Mark, that was before he was born. But for John, Walter, and I mean, I was not in EMS at that time, but I was alive, so that's not that long ago. And when we look at the lifespan of our industry, it's not that long ago.
So you know that the video, if there's a will, there's a way. Have you seen that video, Terry?
Yeah.
So those old guys sitting there smoking and playing cards at the beginning
Yeah.
at the rescue squad house, that's what we used to do. You could ask Billy that same thing. They smoked inside the building, they played cards, and that's what you did. Look, he's shaking his head, waiting for a call. And as soon as the call came out, and I didn't smoke, but I was right out there with the rest of them with even in my, like Billy, my before 18 years, I was right out there with them having a good time. And what could we do? And you know, anyway, the good old days that people don't realize existed in I say rural North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina especially. Those were the things that we had. And we never had that point of, do I pay the power? But it was always, we don't want the county getting involved in our business. We're the rescue squad. We're trying to cover our shifts that we are. We don't want them getting our business. So,
And the doing it for something more than $1. I don't know that that was ever really replaced. It can be taught by folks that have experienced it, but doing something out of passion. What was it? There's a line in the movie Pearl Harbor where he says, "There's nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer," I believe is one of those. And that's some truth to that is, I think I remember a shirt one time that says, it's not a hobby, it's a living, working EMS or something. And it was a shot at volunteer EMS having to go to professional career level or whatnot. But I was like, it's different when you pick up that guitar. That's a hobby of mine and play it because I love doing it versus getting paid to have to go on stage and do it. I think that's the difference and stuff. When you go and do stuff because it's out of love and passion, you produce a different product than folks that are paid to do something. And I personally feel like that is the thing missing. Not that we don't need to pay people, but we're missing the passion, amongst other things. But that to me, it stands out a whole lot.
So how do we help people find that passion? Because we want that passion. We want the people that we're training and bringing into the profession to kind of have that great experience that we had coming into it. How do we help them find that level of passion?
Well, I mean, I think, Mark, that's where it's different at is, when people were calling Gates County back then or wherever Walter,
Perquimans.
then they were hurt. They were in need. They actually needed something. And today you poll the audience and you got 80-90% of the people that call 911 utilizing the services don't even need an ambulance. I mean, they don't need it.
Don't take that the wrong way, because we had some of these same people who called every other day for the same stupid thing. So don't say that they called and needed something, because we had some of the regulars. But I think the difference today than the difference then is, we may have went 3 or 4 days and never ran a call. Well, those days don't happen anymore. I was looking, in our local 911, I saw somebody posted today in 1990, the first day 911 went into service, they had 14 emergency calls they answered. They answered 14 calls in a 12-hour shift. Today, they probably answer 14 calls in a 10-minute. Yeah, some places a minute.
Yeah.
So, I think it's the, different in the world. But, Mark, I think people still have passion to do things. And I think, if you poll 3/4 of the people, they're probably not an EMS all for the money. They're in it for, the excitement of getting to do something every day, looking out for the communities that they serve. But I think with everything that comes and goes, and it was a different passion when you had grandmas and granddaddies that were working volunteer, and they had the guys who used to work in Perquimans when I was a volunteer, before I got on, they used to work at the Ford dealership. They used to take an ambulance to the Ford dealership, and the call went out, they left. And that was, there was a passion that they had to be able to do, and their business allowed them to do that. Think about today. Would most businesses say, you got an ambulance call? Yeah, you go ahead and go out. Well, we'll pay you while you're gone. You run out and take the patient, come back, and then you're good. Most places can't even do that. Most places can't do that for volunteer fire department. So, I think people still have passion. I think the passion has just moved a little bit. How to make that passion back there, or to change the passion. I don't know that you can, because I don't know that people have the ability to be able to do that volunteering like those guys did and gals did from years and years and years ago. But
so before we flip it to John, so two quick things, and so we're talking about passion, and so Billy, if a passion of yours is EMS, emergency management, helping people plan, do you want to talk about your passion? Because you've traveled a lot, and not just in northeastern North Carolina. You've gone out to the western part of the state where John is, and to the other end of the state, and even you've gone to Oklahoma to do some stuff in a couple other states and places. And so Northeast Exercise isn't just it's headquarters, worldwide headquarters in Roduca, North Carolina, population 5. But do you want to talk a little bit about some of the services that you're able to do with your company?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity. The thing that I try to focus on is my passion. I've never been in a job that was well paid. It's always been a public service type industry. So I really enjoy going to places and learning from others. That's kind of my byline for NEX Disaster Services is if you've got a disaster, we want to be there because there's no class you can take that will supersede learning firsthand. I've have had the opportunity to go out to Oklahoma 7 times and teach for the Choctaw Nation. That's a wonderful relationship that we have, and more importantly to me, it's a friendship. I've met those people, I've eaten with those people, I have visited, gone fishing with those people. It has become a friendship. Pearland, Texas, been to Pearland, worked for them. I just recently utilized some subcontractor help from Sugarland, Texas. I met the director. He was the Sugarland emergency manager at the time, but I met the state director for emergency management for the state of Arizona in Florida at Hurricane Ian. We talk all the time, so it's about relationships. I say all the time, you gotta speak words to people, and I like doing that. And I try to take that passion along with me. I enjoy teaching. I've got that education background, and I just love telling people experiences that I have, lessons that I've learned from experiences that I've been blessed to participate in, and then do exercises. You were talking about trying to bring that passion back to the professionals of today. I think getting them in the community is super important. We used to do drills all the time. We would moulash patients and we would wreck cars and we would set stuff on fire, man. And we did some crazy stuff doing drills, but it was a little bit of excitement, and it was different than sitting around smoking and playing cards. So if I could if I could tell anybody that is an EMS supervisor now, allow the people to get out of the station. Allow them to get out and go volunteer at a school. Let them go shake hands with the kids. Let them go to the sheriff's office and hang out with the deputies and just get out in the community. Go to church events when there's a stinking bazaar or something. Let them go and talk to people. So the only time they see them is not on that ambulance, and it'll build a little bit of that kind of integration back with that community. So those drills, I really enjoyed doing those when I was young in EMS, and I brought that over with me into NEX Disaster Services. I love doing exercises. Do a lot of active assailant things with companies and schools and municipalities. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in too. We shouldn't have to teach that, but we do. I do a lot of incident management. I'm an operations section chief. I just recently completed my incident commander certification. So I like going and giving the opportunity for people to function in an incident management team. And those exercises give me that opportunity. So I've got a great group of subcontract folks that I use from time to time. And it's really been a blessing for me and my wife and my family, because they all help me to continue to do what I like to do. So thank you for the opportunity to shamelessly plug NEX Disaster Services.
And one final thing, if you're doing an ICS 203 and you needed to make an assignment for somebody who was your best friend, who would fill that best friend assignment in that ICS 203 for Billy Winn?
We'll have to
Well-
do an EM43 and submit a flash request for a best friend.
Hey, I'm digging what you're putting down. Well, that's good stuff right there. A 204 would be an assignment. That's a assignment. But if I was putting a 203 down, it would be Anita Winn. She is my best friend. She has been since 1986.
That's your current wife?
It is my current wife, as a matter of fact.
You can call her Mrs. Winn.
She's such a good woman that I was in Hawaii deployed during my 25th wedding anniversary,
Oh,
and she's still my current wife. So
When you said Anita Winn, I immediately thought you were making a Dallas Cowboy joke.
that was a good one.
For good reason.
You'll find Billy's contact information in the show notes. So if you're listening on any of the podcast channels, I'll have his contact information there. So if you're like, hey, we might be interested in having some of this stuff done and we didn't really know who to go to, you'll be able to find his contact information in those show notes. We've sort of glossed over it. We've talked about it for a couple of weeks or whatnot, but I believe the rumor that Walter heard alluding to Mark has a great big announcement regarding the state of North Carolina. Do you not?